The Vikings came from the three countries that we now call Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, which together are known as Scandinavia. However, they soon set their sights on distant shores to trade with, to plunder, and sometimes to settle in. They couldn't have done any of this without being masters of the sea. What roads are to us today, the oceans were to the Vikings. Sailing was their main way of traveling around the little islands and through the water valleys called fjords that made up their home territory. It was also how they hunted fish, seals, and whales to get food, oil, and skins and bones for clothing and tools. The sea was like a giant Viking supermarket containing pretty much everything they needed to live. Just as we today have different vehicles like cars, lorries, and motorbikes, the Vikings had a boat for every occasion. They were master shipbuilders, creating big cargo ships called knars, dinky little rowing boats called fairings, and countless other sailing and fishing boats, all with the curved shape that the Vikings were mad about. In fact, they loved their boats so much that they were sometimes even buried in them. Fantastically beautiful royal funeral ships have been found buried under the ground in Norway and other places. The most famous of all Viking ships was the longboat, appropriately named because this type of ship could be up to 23 meters in length. Longboats were used for voyages and warfare and were powered by sails and men with oars. The rowers didn't get comfy seats to sit on. They had to perch on the storage boxes that contained their food supplies of dried meat, nuts, cheese, water, and ale. Super space-saving. The main advantage of a longboat was its speed. A Viking crew could get from Scandinavia to North America in just under a month. That might sound like a long journey to us, but with no engines and just a sail in your muscles, that's pretty good going. They had no sat-nav either. If they were sailing near a coastline, they used well-known landmarks to guide them, and in the open ocean, they used the sun and stars to navigate. The Vikings liked to give future voyagers a hand, too, so they made maps as they went along. Storms were, of course, one of the greatest dangers on a sea voyage, but just occasionally a storm could produce a happy accident. For example, a bloke called Gunnbjorn was blown off course in the Atlantic Ocean and ended up being the first Viking to catch a sight of Greenland. Canada was also discovered in this way when poor lost Bjarni Horjolfsson stumbled across it after being thrown well out of his way by a storm. Of course, Viking ships weren't just used for trading and exploring, but also for something much more sinister: raiding. The Vikings were the gangsters of their day, demanding protection money from those who paid and plundering those who didn't. People in Western Europe learned to fear the day that a longboat would suddenly pull up unexpectedly full of axe-wielding Vikings who would set about looting their target. There wasn't exactly a lot of chit-chat, just havoc. The Vikings took cattle, grain, money, and slaves. They were particularly fond of looting rich monasteries and were even known to steal the church bells off the roof. They really did take pretty much everything but the kitchen sink. So what did they do with all that stuff then? Well, they shared it out amongst themselves. It was all very fair, except for the folk they nicked it from, of course. If you were part of an expert crew of raiders, you could become very rich. With no banks to safely store their gold in, the Vikings tended to do something that we might find a bit odd today. They buried it. Hoards of Viking treasure are sometimes still unearthed today. Just imagine discovering a beautifully decorated chest, stuffed to the brim with gold, silver, and jewelry. You better get yourself a metal detector.